Isolated, cramped in the vast unknown, to save their small lives from surrounding death they made a tiny circle of defense against the siege of the huge universe. They preyed upon the world and were its prey, but never dreamed to conquer and be free. Obeying the world power's hints and firm taboos, a scanty part they drew from her rich store. There was no conscious code and no life plan. The patterns of thinking of a little group fixed a traditional behavior's law. Ignorant of soul save as a wraith within, tied to a mechanism of unchanging lives and to a dull usual sense and feelings beat, they turned in grooves of animal desire. In walls of stone fenced round they worked and warred, did by a banded selfishness a small good or wrought a dreadful wrong and cruel pain on sentient lives and thought they did no ill. Ardent from the sack of happy peaceful homes and gorged with slaughter, plunder, rape and fire, they made of human selves their helpless prey, a drove of captives led to lifelong woe, or torture a spectacle made an holiday, mocking or thrilled by their torn victims' pangs, admiring themselves as titans and as gods proudly they sang their high and glorious deeds and praised their victory and their splendid force. An animal in the instinctive herd pushed by life impulses, forced by common needs, each in his own kind saw his ego's glass, to him were parts of his life, his adjunct selves, his personal nebula's constituent stars, satellite companions of his solar eye, a master of his life's environment, a leader of a huddled human mass herding for safety on a dangerous earth. He gathered them round him as if minor powers to make a common front against the world, or, weakened soul on an indifferent earth, as a fortress for his undefended heart, or else to heal his body's loneliness. In others than his kind he sensed a foe, an alien unlike force to shun and fear, a stranger and adversary to hate and slay. Or he lived as lives the solitary brute, at war with all he bore his single fate. Absorbed in the present act, the fleeting days, none thought to look beyond the hour's gains, or dreamed to make this earth a fairer world, or felt some touch divine surprise his heart. The gladness that the fugitive moment gave, the desire grasped, the bliss, the experience won, movement and speed and strength were joy enough and bodily longings shared and quarrel and play, and tears and laughter and the need called love. In war and clasp these life wants joined the all-life, wrestlings of a divided unity inflicting mutual grief and happiness in ignorance of the self forever one. Arming its creatures with delight and hope a half-awakened nescience struggled there to know by sight and touch the outside of things. Instinct was formed, in memory's crowded sleep the past lived on as in a bottomless sea, inverting into half-thought the quickened sense clutched to her the little she could reach and seize and put aside in her subconscient cave. So must the dim being grow in light and force and rise to his higher destiny at last, look up to God and round at the universe, and learn by failure and progress, by fall and battle with environment and doom, by suffering discover his deep soul and by possession grow to his own vasts. Halfway she stopped and found her path no more. Still nothing was achieved but to begin, yet finished seemed the circle of her force. Only she had beaten out sparks of ignorance, only the life could think and not the mind, only the sense could feel and not the soul. Only was lit some heat of the flame of life, some joy to be, some rapturous leaps of sense. All was an impetus of half-conscious force, a spirit sprawling drowned in dense life foam, a vague self-grasping at the shape of things. Behind all moved seeking for vessels to hold a first raw vintage of the grapes of God, on earth's mud a spilth of the supernal bliss, intoxicating the stupefied soul and mind a heady wine of rapture dark and crude, dim, uncast yet into spiritual form, obscure inhabitant of the world's blind core, an unborn Godhead's will, a mute desire. A third creation now revealed its face. A mold of body's early mind was made. A glint of light kindled the obscure world force, it dowered a driven world with the seeing idea and armed the act with thought's dynamic point, a small thinking being watched the works of time. A difficult evolution from below called a masked intervention from above, else this great, blind inconscient universe could never have disclosed its hidden mind, or even in blinkers worked in beast and man the intelligence that devised the cosmic scheme. At first he saw a dim obscure mind power moving concealed by matter and dumb life. A current thin, it streamed in life's vast flow, tossing and drifting under a drifting sky amid the surge and glimmering tremulous wash, released in splash of sense and feelings waves. In the deep midst of an insentient world, its huddled waves and foam of consciousness ran pressing and eddying through a narrow strait, carrying experience in its crowded pace. It flowed, emerging into upper light from the deep pool of its subliminal birth to reach some high existence still unknown. There was no thinking self, aim there was none, all was unorganized stress and seekings vague. Only to the unstable surface rose sensations, stabs and edges of desire and passion's leaps and brief emotions' cries, a casual colloquy of flesh with flesh, a murmur of heart to longing wordless heart, glimmerings of knowledge with no shape of thought and jets of subconscious will or hunger's pulls. All was dim sparkle on a foaming top, it whirled around a drifting shadow self on an inconscient flood of force in time. Then came the pressure of a seeing power that drew all into a dancing turbid mass circling around a single luminous point, center of reference in a conscious field, figure of a unitary light within. It lit the impulse of the half-sentient flood, even an illusion gave of fixity as if a sea could serve as a firm soil. That strange observing power imposed its sight. It forced on flux a limit and a shape, it gave its stream a lower narrow bank, drew lines to snare the spirit's formlessness. It fashioned the life-mind of bird and beast, the answer of the reptile and the fish, the primitive pattern of the thoughts of man. A finite movement of the infinite came winging its way through a wide air of time, a march of knowledge moved in nescience and guarded in the form a separate soul. Its right to be immortal it reserved, but built a wall against the siege of death and threw a hook to clutch eternity. A thinking entity appeared in space. A little ordered world broke into view where being had prison room for act and sight, a floor to walk, a clear but scanty range. An instrument personality was born, and a restricted clamped intelligence consented to confine in narrow bounds its seeking. It tied the thought to visible things, prohibiting the adventure of the unseen and the soul's tread through unknown infinities. A reflex reason, nature habits glass-illumined life to know and fix its field, accept a dangerous ignorant brevity and the inconclusive purpose of its walk and profit by the hour's precarious chance in the allotted boundaries of its fate. A little joy and knowledge satisfied this little being tied into a note a little span of life in all vast time. A thought was there that planned, a will that strove, but for small aims within a narrow scope, wasting unmeasured toil on transient things. It knew itself a creature of the mud, it asked no larger law, no loftier aim, it had no inward look, no upward gaze. A backward scholar on logic's rickety bench indoctrinated by the erring sense, it took appearance for the face of God, for casual lights the marching of the suns, for heaven a starry strip of doubtful blue, aspects of being feigned to be the whole. There was a voice of busy interchange, a marketplace of trivial thoughts and acts, a life soon spent, a mind the body's slave here seemed the brilliant crown of nature's work, and tiny egos took the world as means to sate wild dwarf lusts and brief desires, in a death-closed passage saw life start and end as though a blind alley were creation's sign, as if for this the soul had coveted birth in the wonderland of a self-creating world and the opportunities of cosmic space. This creature passionate only to survive, fettered to puny thoughts with no wide range and to the body's needs and pangs and joys, this fire growing by its fuel's death, increased by what it seized and made its own, it gathered and grew and gave itself to none. Only it hoped for greatness in its den and pleasure and victory in small fields of power and conquest of life-room for self and kin, an animal limited by its feeding space. It knew not the immortal in limits, only it was powerful, acute to capture truth for outward use, its knowledge was the body's instrument, absorbed in the little works of its prison house it turned around the same unchanging points in the same circle of interest and desire, but thought itself the master of its jail. Although for action, not for wisdom made, thought was its apex, or its gutter's rim, it saw an image of the external world and saw its surface self, but knew no more. Out of a slow confused embroiled self-search mind grew to a clarity cut out, precise, a gleam enclosed in a stone ignorance. In this bound thinking's narrow leadership tied to the soil, inspired by common things, attached to a confined familiar world, amid the multitude of her motived plots, her changing actors and her million masks, life was a play monotonously the same. There were no vast perspectives of the spirit, no swift invasions of unknown delight, no golden distances of wide release. This petty state resembled our human days but fixed to eternity of changeless type, a moment's movement doomed to last through time. Existence bridge-like spanned the inconscient gulfs, a half-illumined building in a mist, which from a void of form arose to sight and jutted out into a void of soul. A little light in a great darkness born, life knew not where it went nor whence it came. Around all floated still the nescient haze. Canto 5. The Godheads of the Little Life. A fixed and narrow power with rigid forms, he saw the empire of the little life, an unhappy corner in eternity. It lived upon the margin of the idea protected by ignorance as in a shell. Then, hoping to learn the secret of this world, he peered across its scanty fringe of sight, to disengage from its surface-clear obscurity the force that moved it and the idea that made, imposing smallness on the infinite, the ruling spirit of its littleness, the divine law that gave it right to be, its claim on nature and its need in time. He plunged his gaze into the siege of mist that held this ill-lit straitened continent ringed with the skies and seas of ignorance and kept it safe from truth and self and light. As when a searchlight stabs the night's blind breast and dwellings and trees and figures of men appear as if revealed to an eye in nothingness, all lurking things were torn out of their veils and held up in his vision's sun-white blaze. A busy, restless, uncouth populace teemed in their dusky, unnoted thousands there. In a mist of secrecy wrapping the world seem the little deities of time's nether act who work remote from heaven's controlling eye, plotted, unknown to the creatures whom they move, the small conspiracies of this petty reign amused with the small contrivings, the brief hopes and little eager steps and little ways and reptile wallowings in the dark and dust, and the crouch and ignominy of creeping life. A trepidant and motley multitude, a strange pell-mell of magic artisans, was seen moulding the plastic clay of life, an elfin brood, an elemental kind. Astonished by the unaccustomed glow, as if imminent in the shadows started up imps with wry limbs and carved beast visages, sprite prompters goblin wizened or fairer small, and genii fairer but unsouled and poor and fallen beings, their heavenly portion lost, and errant divinities trapped in time's dust. Ignorant and dangerous wills but armed with power, half animal, half god their mood, their shape. Out of the greyness of a dim background their whispers come, an inarticulate force, awake in mind an echoing thought or word, to their sting of impulse the heart's sanction draw, and in that little nature do their work and fill its powers and creatures with unease. Its seed of joy they curse with sorrow's fruit, put out with error's breath its scanty lights and turn its surface truths to falsehood's ends, its small emotions spur, its passions drive to the abyss or through the bog and mire, or else with a goad of hard dry lusts they prick, while jogs on devious ways that nowhere lead life's cart finding no issue from ignorance. To sport with good and evil is their law, luring to failure and meaningless success, all models they corrupt, all measures cheat, make knowledge a poison, virtue a pattern dull and lead the endless cycles of desire through semblances of sad or happy chance to an inescapable fatality. All by their influence is enacted there. Nor there alone is their empire or their role. Wherever are soulless minds and guideless lives and in a small body self is all that counts, wherever love and light and largeness lack, these crooked fashioners take up their task. To all half-conscious worlds they extend their reign. Here too these godlings drive our human hearts, our nature's twilight is their lurking place, here too the darkened primitive heart obeys the veiled suggestions of a hidden mind that dogs our knowledge with misleading light and stands between us and the truth that saves. It speaks to us with the voices of the night, our darkened lives to greater darkness move, our seekings listen to calamitous hopes. A structure of unseeing thoughts is built and reason used by an irrational force. This earth is not alone our teacher and nurse, the powers of all the worlds have entrance here. In their own fields they follow the wheel of law and cherish the safety of a settled type, On earth out of their changeless orbit thrown their law is kept, lost their fixed form of things. Into a creative chaos they are cast where all asks order but is driven by chance, strangers to earth, nature, they must learn earth's ways, aliens or opposites, they must unite, they work and battle and with pain agree, these join, those part, all parts and joins anew, but never can we know and truly live till all have found their divine harmony. Our life's uncertain way wind circling on, our mind's unquiet search asks always light, till they have learned their secret in their source, in the light in the joy of the eternal soul and one. But now the light supreme is far away, our conscious life obeys the inconscient's laws, to ignorant purposes and blind desires our hearts are moved by an ambiguous force, even our mind's conquests wear a battered crown. A slowly changing order binds our will. This is our doom until our souls are free. A mighty hand then rolls mind's firmaments back, infinity takes up the finite's axe and nature steps into the eternal light. Then only ends this dream of nether life. At the outset of this enigmatic world which seems at once an enormous brute machine and a slow unmasking of the spirit in things, in this revolving chamber without walls in which God sits impassive everywhere as if unknown to himself and by us unseen in a miracle of inconscient secrecy, yet is all here his action and his will. In this whirl and sprawl through infinite vacancy the spirit became matter and lay in the whirl, a body sleeping without sense or soul. A mass phenomenon of visible shapes supported by the silence of the void appeared in the eternal consciousness and seemed an outward and insensible world. There was none there to see and none to feel, only the miraculous inconscient, a subtle wizard skilled, was at its task. Inventing ways for magical results, managing creation's marvelous device, marking mechanically dumb wisdom's points, using the unthought inevitable idea, it did the works of God's intelligence or wrought the will of some supreme unknown. Still consciousness was hidden in nature's womb, and felt was the bliss whose rapture dreamed the worlds. Being was an inert substance driven by force. At first was only an etheric space, its huge vibrations circled round and round housing some unconceived initiative, upheld by a supreme original breath expansion and contraction's mystic act created touch and friction in the void, into abstract emptiness brought clash and clasp, parent of an expanding universe in a matrix of disintegrating force, by spending it conserved in endless sun. On the hearth of space it kindled a viewless fire that, scattering worlds as one might scatter seeds, whirled out the luminous order of the stars. An ocean of electric energy formlessly formed its strange wave particles constructing by their dance this solid scheme, its mightiness in the atom shut to rest, masses were forged or feigned in visible shapes, light flung the photon's swift revealing spark and showed, in the minuteness of its flash imaged, this cosmos of apparent things. Thus has been made this real impossible world, an obvious miracle or convincing show. Or so it seems to man's audacious mind who seats his thought as the arbiter of truth, his personal vision as impersonal fact, as witnesses of an objective world his erring sense and his instrument's artifice. Thus must he work life's tangible riddle out in a doubtful light, by error seize on truth and slowly part the visage and the veil. Or else, forlorn of faith in mind and sense, his knowledge a bright body of ignorance, he sees in all things strangely fashioned here the unwelcome jest of a deceiving force, a parable of Maya and her might. This vast perpetual motion caught and held in the mysterious and unchanging change of the persistent movement we call time and ever renewing its recurrent beat, these mobile rounds that stereotype a flux, these static objects in the cosmic dance that are but energies self-repeating whirls prolonged by the spirit of the brooding void, awaited life and sense and waking mind. A little the dreamer changed his pose of stone. But when the inconscient's scrupulous work was done and chance coerced by fixed immutable laws, a scene was set for nature's conscious play. Then stirred the spirit's mute immobile sleep, the force concealed broke dumbly, slowly out. A dream of living woke in matter's heart, a will to live moved the inconscient's dust, a freak of living startled vacant time, ephemeral in a blank eternity, infinitesimal in a dead infinite. A subtler breath quickened dead matter's forms, The world set rhythm changed to a conscious cry, a serpent power twinned the insensible force. Islands of living dotted lifeless space and germs of living formed in formless air. A life was born that followed matter's law, ignorant of the motives of its steps, ever inconstant, yet forever the same. It repeated the paradox that gave it birth. Its restless and unstable stabilities recurred incessantly in the flow of time, and purposeful movements in unthinking forms betrayed the heavings of an imprisoned will. Waking and sleep lay locked in mutual arms. Helpless and indistinct came pleasure and pain, trembling with the first faint thrills of a world soul. A strength of life that could not cry or move, yet broke into beauty, signing some deep delight. An inarticulate sensibility, throbs of the heart of an unknowing world, ran through its somnolent torpor, and there stirred a vague, uncertain thrill, a wandering beat, a dim unclosing as of secret eyes. Infant self-feeling grew and birth was born. A godhead woke but lay with dreaming limbs, her house refused to open its sealed doors. Insentient to our eyes that only see the form, the act and not the imprisoned God, life hid in her pulse, a cult of growth and power, a consciousness with mute stifled beats of sense, a mind suppressed that knew not yet of thought, an inert spirit that could only be. At first she raised no voice, no motion dared, charged with world power, instinct with living force. Only she clung with her roots to the safe earth, thrilled dumbly to the shocks of ray and breeze, and put out tendril fingers of desire. The strength in her yearning for sun and light felt not the embrace that made her breathe and live. Absorbed she dreamed, content with beauty and hue. At last the charmed immensity looked forth, astir, vibrant, hungering. She groped for mind, then slowly sense quivered and thought peered out. She forced the reluctant mold to grow aware. The magic was chiseled of a conscious form, its tranced vibrations rhythmed a quick response, and luminescent in a body lit the miracle of the heart's love and the soul's witness gaze. Impelled by an unseen will, there could break out fragments of some vast impulse to become, and vivid glimpses of a secret self, and the doubtful seeds and force of shapes to be awoke from the inconscient swoon of things. An animal creation crept and ran and flew and called between the earth and sky, hunted by death but hoping still to live and glad to breathe if only for a while. Then man was molded from the original brute. A thinking mind had come to lift life's moods, the keen-edged tool of a nature mixed and vague, an intelligence half-witness, half-machine. This seeming driver of her wheel of work's mission to motive and record her drift and fix its law on her inconstant powers, this master spring of a delicate enginery, aspired to enlighten its user and refine, lifting to a vision of the indwelling power the absorbed mechanic's crude initiative. He raised his eyes, heaven-like mirrored a face. Amazed at the works wrought in her mystic sleep, she looked upon the world that she had made, wondering now seized the great automaton. She paused to understand herself and aim, pondering she learned to act by conscious rule. A visioned measure guided her rhythmic steps, thought bordered her instincts with a frame of will and lit with the idea her blinded urge. On her massive impulses, her reflex acts, on the inconscience pushed or guided drift and mystery of unthinking accurate steps she stuck the specious image of herself. On matter's acts she imposed a patterned law. She made a thinking body from chemic cells and molded a being out of a driven force. To be what she was not inflamed her hope, she turned her dream towards some high unknown. A breath was felt below of one supreme. An opening looked up to spheres above, and colored shadows limned on mortal ground the passing figures of immortal things. A quick celestial flash could sometimes come. The illumined soul ray fell on heart and flesh and touched with semblances of ideal light the stuff of which our earthly dreams are made. A fragile human love that could not last, ego's moth wings to lift the seraph soul, appeared, a surface glamour of brief date extinguished by a scanty breath of time. Joy that forgot mortality for a while came, a rare visitor who left betimes, and made all things seem beautiful for an hour. Hopes that soon fade to drab realities and passions that crumble to ashes while they blaze kindled the common earth with their brief flame. A creature insignificant and small visited, uplifted by an unknown power, man labored on his little patch of earth for means to last, to enjoy, to suffer and die. A spirit that perished not with the body and breath was there like a shadow of the unmanifest and stood behind the little personal form but claimed not yet this earthly embodiment. Assenting to nature's long slow-moving toil, watching the works of his own ignorance, unknown, and felt the mighty witness lives and nothing shows the glory that is here. A wisdom governing the mystic world, a silence listening to the cry of life, it sees the hurrying crowd of moments stream towards the still greatness of a distant hour. This huge world unintelligibly turns in the shadow of a mused inconscience, it hides a key to inner meanings missed, it locks in our hearts a voice we cannot hear. An enigmatic labor of the spirit, an exact machine of which none knows the use, an art and ingenuity without sense, this minute elaborate orchestrated life forever plays its motiveless symphonies. The mind learns and knows not, turning its back to truth, it studies surface laws by surface thought, life's step surveys and nature's process sees, not seeing for what she acts or why we live, it marks her tireless care of just device, her patient intricacy of fine detail, the ingenious spirit's brave inventive plan in her great futile mass of endless works, adds purposeful figures to her purposeless sum, its gabled stories piles, its climbing roofs on the close-carved foundations she has laid, imagined citadels reared in mythic air or mounts a stare of dream to a mystic moon, transient creations point and hit the sky, a world conjecture's scheme is labored out on the dim floor of mind's incertitude, or painfully built a fragmentary whole. Impenetrable, a mystery recondite is the vast plan of which we are a part, its harmonies are discords to our view because we know not the great theme they serve. Inscrutable work the cosmic agents is. Only the fringe of a wide surge we see, our instruments have not that greater light, our will tunes not with the eternal will, our heart's sight is too blind and passionate. Impotent to share in nature's mystic tact, inapt to feel the pulse and core of things, our reason cannot sound life's mighty sea and only counts its waves and scans its foam, it knows not whence these motions touch and pass, it sees not whither sweeps the hurrying flood, only it strives to canalize its powers and hopes to turn its course to human ends, but all its means come from the inconscient store. Unseen here act dim huge world energies and only trickles and currents are our share. Our mind lives far off from the authentic light catching at little fragments of the truth in a small corner of infinity, our lives are inlets of an ocean's force. Our conscious movements have sealed origins but with those shadowy seats no converse hold, no understanding binds our comrade parts, our acts emerge from a crypt our minds ignore. Our deepest depths are ignorant of themselves, even our body is a mystery shop, as our earth's roots lurk screened below our earth, so lie unseen our roots of mind and life. Our springs are kept close hid beneath, within, our souls are moved by powers behind the wall. In the subterranean reaches of the spirit a puissance acts and recks not what it means, using unthinking monitors and scribes, it is the cause of what we think and feel. The troglodytes of the subconscious mind, ill-trained slow-stammering interpreters only of their small tasks routine-aware and busy with the record in our concealed in the subliminal secrecies mid an obscure occult machinery, capture the mystic Morse whose measured lilt transmits the messages of the cosmic force. A whisper falls into life's inner ear and echoes from the dun subconscient caves, speech leaps, thought quivers, the heart vibrates, the will answers and tissue and nerve obey the call. Our lives translate these subtle intimacies, all is the commerce of a secret power. A thinking puppet is the mind of life, its choice is the work of elemental strengths that know not their own birth and end and cause and glimpse not the immense intent they serve. In this nether life of man drab-hued and dull, yet filled with poignant small ignoble things, the conscious doll is pushed 100 ways and feels the push but not the hands that drive. For none can see the masked ironic troupe to whom our figure selves are marionettes, our deeds unwitting movements in their grasp, our passionate strife and entertainment seen. Ignorant themselves of their own fount of strength they play their part in the enormous whole. Agents of darkness imitating light, spirits obscure and moving things obscure, unwillingly they serve a mightier power. Ananke's engines organizing chance, channels perverse of a stupendous will, tools of the unknown who use us as their tools, invested with power in nature's nether state. Into the actions mortals think their own they bring the incoherencies of fate, against all higher truth their stuff rebels, only to titan force their will lies prone. Inordinate their hold on human hearts, in all our nature's turns they intervene. Insignificant architects of low-built lives and engineers of interest and desire, out of crude earthiness and muddy thrills and coarse reactions of material nerve they build our huddled structures of self-will and the ill-lighted mansions of our thought, or with the ego's factories and marts surround the beautiful temple of the soul. Artists minute of the hues of littleness, they set the mosaic of our comedy or plan the trivial tragedy of our days, arrange the deed, combine the circumstance and the fantasia of the mood's costume. These unwise prompters of man's ignorant heart and tutors of his stumbling speech and will, movers of petty wraths and lusts and hates and changeful thoughts and shallow emotion starts, these slight illusion makers with their masks, painters of the decor of a dull, hued stage and nimble scene shifters of the human play, ever are busy with this ill-lit scene. Ourselves incapable to build our fate only as actors speak and strut our parts until the piece is done and we pass off into a brighter time and subtler space. Thus they inflict their little pygmy law and curb the mounting slow uprise of man, then his too scanty walk with death they close. This is the ephemeral creature's daily life. As long as the human animal is lord and a dense nether nature screens the soul, as long as intellect's outward-gazing sight serves earthy interest and creature joys, an incurable littleness pursues his days. Ever since consciousness was born on earth, life is the same in insect, ape and man, its stuff unchanged, its way the common root. If new designs, if richer details grow and thought is added and more tangled cares, if little by little it wears a brighter face, still even in man the plot is mean and poor. A gross content prolongs his fallen state, his small successes are failures of the soul, his little pleasures punctuate frequent griefs, hardship and toil are the heavy price he pays for the right to live and his last wage is death. An inertia sunk towards inconscience, a sleep that imitates death is his repose. A puny splendor of creative force is made his spur to fragile human works which yet outlast their brief creator's breath. He dreams sometimes of the revels of the gods and sees the Dionysian gesture pass, a leonine greatness that would tear his soul if through his failing limbs and fainting heart the sweet and joyful mighty madness swept. Trivial amusements stimulate and waste the energy given to him to grow and be. His little hour is spent in little things. A brief companionship with many jars, a little love and jealousy and hate, a touch of friendship mid indifferent crowds draw his heart plan on life's diminutive map. If something great awakes, too frail his pitch to reveal its zenith tension of delight, his thought to eternize its ephemeral soar, ART's brilliant gleam is a pastime for his eyes, a thrill that smites the nerves is music spell. Amidst his harassed toil and welter of cares, pressed by the labor of his crowding thoughts, he draws sometimes around his aching brow nature's calm mighty hands to heal his life pain. He is saved by her silence from his rack of self, in her tranquil beauty is his purest bliss. A new life dawns, he looks out from vistas wide, the spirit's breath moves him but soon retires, his strength was not made to hold that puissant guest. All dulls down to convention and routine or a fierce excitement brings him vivid joys, his days are tinged with the red hue of strife and lust's hot glare and passion's crimson stain, battle and murder are his tribal game. Time has he none to turn his eyes within and look for his lost self and his dead soul. His motion on too short an axe's wheels, he cannot soar but creeps on his long road or if, impatient of the trudge of time, he would make a splendid haste on fate's slow road, his heart that runs soon pants and tires and sinks, or he walks ever on and finds no end. Hardly a few can climb to greater life. All tunes to a low scale and conscious pitch. His knowledge dwells in the house of ignorance, his force nears not even once the omnipotent, rare are his visits of heavenly ecstasy. The bliss which sleeps in things and tries to wake, breaks out in him in a small joy of life, this scanty grace is his persistent stay, it lightens the burden of his many ills and reconciles him to his little world. He is satisfied with his common average kind, tomorrow's hopes and his old rounds of thought, his old familiar interests and desire she has made into a thick and narrowing hedge defending his small life from the invisible, his being's kinship to infinity he has shut away from him into inmost self, fenced off the greatnesses of hidden God. His being was formed to play a trivial part in a little drama on a petty stage. In a narrow plot he has pitched his tent of life beneath the wide gaze of the starry vast. He is the crown of all that has been done, thus is creation's labor justified, this is the world's result, nature's last poise. And if this were all and nothing more were meant, if what now seems were the whole of what must be, if this were not a stard through which we pass on our road from matter to eternal self, to the light that made the worlds, the cause of things, well might interpret our mind's limited view existence as an accident in time, illusion or phenomenon or freak, the paradox of a creative thought which moves between unreal opposites, inanimate force struggling to feel and know, matter that chanced to read itself by mind, inconscience monstrously engendering soul. At times all looks unreal and remote, we seem to live in a fiction of our thoughts pieced from sensation's fanciful traveller's tale, or caught on the film of the recording brain, a figment or circumstance in cosmic sleep. A somnambulist walking under the moon, an image of ego treads through an ignorant dream counting the moments of a spectral time. In a false perspective of effect and cause, trusting to a specious whither it knows not, to what fabulous verge. All here is dreamed or doubtfully exists, but who the dreamer is and whence he looks is still unknown or only a shadowy guess. Or the world is real but ourselves too small, insufficient for the mightiness of our stage. A thin life curve crosses the titan whirl of the orbit of a soulless universe, and in the belly of the sparse rolling mass a mind looks out from a small casual globe and wonders what itself and all things are. And yet to some interned subjective sight that strangely has formed in matter's sightless stuff, a pointillage minute of little self takes figure as world being's conscious base. Such is our scene in the half-light below. This is the sign of matter's infinite, this the weird purport of the picture shown to science the giantess, measurer of her field, as she pause on the record of her close survey and mathematizes her huge external world, to reason bound within the circle of sense, or in thought's broad impalpable exchange a speculator in tenuous vast ideas, abstractions in the void her currency we know not with what firm values for its base. Only religion in this bankruptcy presents its dubious riches to our hearts or signs unprovisioned checks on the beyond, our poverty shall there have its revenge. Our spirits depart discarding a futile life into the blank unknown or with them take death's passport into immortality. Yet was this only a provisional scheme, a false appearance sketched by limiting sense, mind's insufficient self-discovery, an early attempt, a first experiment. This was a toy to amuse the infant earth, but knowledge ends not in these surface powers that live upon a ledge in the ignorance and dare not look into the dangerous depths or to stare upward measuring the unknown. There is a deeper seeing from within and, when we have left these small purlieus of mind, a greater vision meets us on the heights in the luminous wideness of the spirit's gaze. At last there wakes in us a witness soul that looks at truths unseen and scans the unknown, then all assumes a new and marvelous face, the world quivers with a godlight at its core, in time's deep heart high purposes move and live, life's borders crumble and join infinity. This broad, confused, yet rigid scheme becomes a magnificent imbroglio of the gods, a game, a work ambiguously divine. Our seekings are short-lived experiments made by a wordless and inscrutable power testing its issues from inconscient night to meet its luminous self of truth and bliss. It peers at the real through the apparent form, it labors in our mortal mind and sense, amid the figures of the ignorance, in the symbol pictures drawn by word and thought, it seeks the truth to which all figures point, it looks for the source of light with vision's lamp, it works to find the door of all works, the unfelt self within who is the guide, the unknown self above wone I unseen in the unseen vast, there is an influence from a light above, there are thoughts remote and sealed. Eternities, a mystic motive drives the stars and suns. In this passage from a deaf unknowing force to struggling consciousness and transient breath a mighty supernature waits on time. The world is other than we now think and see, our lives a deeper mystery than we have dreamed, our minds are starters in the race to God, our souls deputed selves of the Supreme. Across the cosmic field through narrow lanes asking a scanty dole from fortune's hands and garbed in beggar's robes there walks the One. Even in the theatre of these small lives behind the act a secret sweetness breathes, an urge of miniature divinity. A mystic passion from the wells of God flows through the guarded spaces of the soul, a force that helps supports the suffering earth, an unseen nearness and a hidden joy. There are muffled throbs of laughter's undertones, the murmur of an occult happiness, an exultation in the depths of sleep, a heart of bliss within a world of pain. An infant nursed on nature's covert breast, an infant playing in the magic woods, fluting to rapture by the spirit streams, awaits the hour when we shall turn to his call. In this investiture of fleshly life a soul that is a spark of God survives, and sometimes it breaks through the sordid screen and kindles a fire that makes us half divine. Thereto the golden messengers can come, a door is cut in the mud wall of self, across the lowly threshold with bowed heads angels of ecstasy and self-giving pass, and lodged in an inner sanctuary of dream the makers of the image of deity live. Pity is there and fire-winged sacrifice, and flashes of sympathy and tenderness cast heavenlights from the heart's secluded shrine. A work is done in the deep silences, a glory and wonder of spiritual sense, a laughter in beauty's everlasting space transforming world experience into joy, inhabit the mystery of the untouched gulfs, lulled by time's beats eternity sleeps in us. In the sealed hermetic heart, the happy core, unmoved behind this outer shape of death the eternal entity prepares within its matter of divine felicity, its reign of heavenly phenomenon. Even in our skeptic mind of ignorance a foresight comes of some immense release, our will lifts towards its slow and shaping hands. Each part in us desires its absolute. Our thoughts covet the everlasting light, our strength derives from an omnipotent force, and since from a veiled God-joy the worlds were made and since eternal beauty asks for form even here where all is made of being's dust, our hearts are captured by ensnaring shapes, our very senses blindly seek for bliss. Our error crucifies reality to force its birth and divine body here, compelling, incarnate innate Saviour light the inconscient universe. And when that greater self comes sea-like down to fill this image of our transience, all shall be captured by delight, transformed, in waves of undreamed ecstasy shall roll our mind and life and sense and laugh in a light other than this hard limited human day, the body's tissues thrill apatheosized, its cells sustain bright metamorphosis. This little being of time, this shadow soul, this living dwarf, figurehead of darkened spirit out of its traffic in petty dreams shall rise. Its shape of person and its ego face divested of this mortal travesty, like a clay troll kneaded into a god new made in the image of the eternal guest, it shall be caught to the breast of a white force and, flaming with the paradisal touch in a rose fire of sweet spiritual grace, in the red passion of its infinite change, quiver, awake, and shudder with ecstasy. As if reversing a deformation spell, released from the black magic of the night, renouncing servitude to the dim abyss, it shall learn at last who lived within unseen, and seized with marvel in the adoring heart to the enthroned child Godhead kneel aware, trembling with beauty and delight and love. But first the Spirit's ascent we must achieve out of the chasm from which our nature rose. The soul must soar sovereign above the form and climb to summits beyond mind's half-sleep, our hearts we must inform with heavenly strength, surprise the animal with the occult God. Then kindling the gold tongue of sacrifice, calling the powers of a we shall shed the discredit of our mortal state, make the abysm a road for heaven's descent, acquaint our depths with the supernal ray and cleave the darkness with the mystic fire. Adventuring once more in the natal mist across the dangerous haze, the pregnant stir, he through the astral chaos shore away mid the grey faces of its demon gods, questioned by whispers of its flickering ghosts, besieged by sorceries of its fluent force. As one who walks unguided through strange fields tending he knows not where nor with what hope, he trod a soil that failed beneath his feet and journeyed in stone strength to a fugitive end. His trail behind him was a vanishing line of glimmering points in a vague immensity, a bodiless murmur travelled at his side in the wounded gloom, complaining against light. A huge obstruction its immobile heart, the watching opacity multiplied as he moved its hostile mass of dead and staring eyes, the darkness glimmered like a dying torch. Around him an extinguished phantom glow peopled with shadowy and misleading shapes, the vague in conscience dark and measureless cave. His only sunlight was his spirit's flame. Canto 6. The Kingdoms and Godheads of the Greater Life. As one who between dim receding walls towards the far gleam of a tunnel's mouth, hoping for light, walks now with freer pace and feels approach a breath of wider air, so he escaped from that grey anarchy. Into an ineffectual world he came, a purposeless region of arrested birth where being from non-being fled and dared to live but had no strength long to abide. Above there gleamed a pondering brow of sky tormented, crossed by wings of doubtful haze, adventuring with a voice of roaming winds and crying for a direction in the void like blind souls looking for the selves they lost and wandering through unfamiliar worlds. Wings of vague questioning met the query of space. After denial dawned a dubious hope, a hope of self and form and leave to live and the birth of that which never yet could be, and joy of the mind's hazard, the heart's choice, grace of the unknown and hands of sudden surprise and a touch of sure delight in unsure things. To a strange uncertain tract his journey came where consciousness played with unconscious self and birth was an attempt or episode. A charm drew near that could not keep its spell, an eager power that could not find its way, a chance that chose a strange arithmetic but could not bind with it the forms it made, a multitude that could not guard its sum which less than zero grew and more than one dot arriving at a large and shadowy sense that cared not to define its fleeting drift. Life labored in a strange and mythic air denuded of her sweet magnificent suns. In worlds imagined, never yet made true, a lingering glimmer on creation's verge, one strayed and dreamed and never stopped to achieve would have destroyed that magic space. The marvels of a twilight wonderland full of a beauty strangely, vainly made, a surge of fanciful realities, dim tokens of a splendor sealed above, awoke the passion of the eye's desire, compelled belief on the enamored thought and drew the heart but led it to no goal. A magic flowed as if of moving scenes that kept awhile their fugitive delicacy of sparing lines limned by an abstract art in a rare scanted light with faint dream brush on a silver background of incertitude. An infant glow of heavens near to morn, a fire intense conceived but never lit, caressed the air with ardent hints of day. The perfect longing for imperfection's charm, the illumined caught by the snare of ignorance, ethereal creatures drawn by body's law to that region of promise, beating invisible wings, came hungry for the joy of finite life but too divine to tread created soil and share the fate of perishable things. The children of the unembodied gleam arisen from a formless thought in the soul and chased by an imperishable desire, traversed the field of the pursuing gaze. All that unpersisting failed, work there, life was a search but finding never came. There nothing satisfied, but all allured, things seemed to be that never wholly are, images were seen that looked like living acts and symbols hid the sense they claimed to show, pale dreams grew real to the dreamer's eyes. The souls came there that vainly strive for birth, and spirits entrapped might wander through all time, yet never find the truth by which they live. All ran like hopes that hunt a lurking chance, nothing was solid, nothing felt complete, all was unsafe, miraculous and half-true. It seemed a realm of lives that had no base. Then dawned a greater seeking, broadened sky, a journey under wings of brooding force. First came the kingdom of the morning star, a twilight beauty trembled under its spear and the throb of promise of a wider life. Then slowly rose a great and doubting sun and in its light she made of self a world. A spirit was there that sought for its own deep self, yet was content with fragments pushed in front and parts of living that belied the whole but, pieced together, might one day be true. Yet something seemed to be achieved at last. A growing volume of the will to be, a text of living and a graph of force, a script of acts, a song of conscious forms burdened with meanings fugitive from thought's grasp and crowded with undertones of life's rhythmic cry, could write itself on the hearts of living things. In an outbreak of the might of secret spirit, in life and matter's answer of delight, Some face of deathless beauty could be caught that gave immortality to a moment's joy, some word that could incarnate highest truth leaped out from a chance tension of the soul, some hue of the absolute could fall on life, some glory of knowledge and intuitive sight, some passion of the rapturous heart of love. A hierophant of the bodiless secrecy interned in an unseen spiritual sheath, the wall that pushes sense beyond its scope to feel the light and joy intangible, half found its way into the ineffable's peace, half captured a sealed sweetness of desire that yearned from a bosom of mysterious bliss, half manifested veiled reality. A soul not wrapped into its cloak of mind could glimpse the true sense of a world of forms, illumined by a vision in the thought, upbuoyed by the heart's understanding flame. It could hold in the conscious ether of the spirit the divinity of a symbol universe. This realm inspires us with our vaster hopes, its forces have made landings on our globe, its signs have traced their pattern in our lives, it lends a sovereign movement to our fate, its errant waves motive our life's high surge. All that we seek for is prefigured there, and all we have not known nor ever sought, which yet one day must be born in human hearts, that the timeless may fulfill itself in things. Incarnate in the mystery of the days, eternal in an unclosed infinite, a mounting endless possibility climbs high upon a topless ladder of dream forever in the being's conscious trance. All on that ladder mounts to an unseen end. An energy of perpetual transience makes the journey from which no return is sure, as if in her ascent to her lost source she hoped to unroll all that could ever be. Her high procession moves from stage to stage, a progress leap from sight to greater sight, a process march from form to ampler form, a caravan of the inexhaustible formations of a boundless thought and force. Her timeless power that lay once on the lap of a beginningless and endless calm, now severed from the spirit's immortal bliss, erects the type of all the joys she has lost, compelling transient substance into shape. She hopes by the creative acts released to o'erleap sometimes the gulf she cannot fill, to heal a while the wound of severance, escape from the moment's prison of littleness and meet the eternal's wide sublimities in the uncertain time-filled portioned here. Almost she nears what never can be attained, she shuts eternity into an hour and fills a little soul with the infinite. The immobile leans to the magic of her call, she stands on a shore in the illimitable, perceives the formless dweller in all forms and feels around her infinity's embrace. Her task no ending knows, she serves no aim but labors driven by a nameless will that came from some unknowable formless vast. This is her secret and impossible task, to catch the boundless in a net of birth, to cast the spirit into physical form, to lend speech and thought to the ineffable. She is pushed to reveal the ever unmanifest. Yet by her skill the impossible has been done, she follows her sublime irrational plan, invents devices of her magic art to find new bodies for the infinite and images of the unimaginable. She has lured the eternal into the arms of time. Even now herself she knows not what she has done. For all is wrought beneath a baffling mask, a semblance other than its hidden truth, the aspect wears of an illusion's trick, a feigned time-driven unreality, the unfinished creation of a changing soul in a body changing with the inhabitant.